look at what happened with Windsor Energy and Sussex a few weeks ago, that tells me that the regulations we have in place now aren't sufficient to protect anybody.
The company developed them.
Yeah, well, I mean, so you know, if we've always said all along that if this industry is to proceed, it needs to, we need to make sure that all the proper rules and regulations are in place, but more importantly that the oversight is there too. You got to have the experts on the ground that can actually monitor these companies and, you know, make sure that they're playing by the rules. If you can have the best rules in the world, but if you got nobody there to make sure they're being respected, they're not worth anything. So we've said, you know, the government needs to engage New Brunswickers and needs to try to put in place these rules and regulations and oversight. And if that can't be done at the end of the day, then maybe the industry can't proceed. But our position has still been, let's call for a moratorium for now. The gas isn't going anywhere. Let's make sure to see if we can get it right. And, you know, I'm the first one to admit, I mean, if you look back at the former government and the way we handled the NB Power file, you know, I think we would have learned a lesson that New Brunswickers wanted to be involved in some of these big decisions.
They are big decisions.
And they are, and this is a big decision as well. And I would have thought the Alward government would have learned from our mistakes and would have done things differently on this file, but they haven't. They're keeping New Brunswickers, you know, out of the loop, despite consulting on dozens of other issues of not much significance as far as I'm concerned. But on some of the big major issues, they're not consulting New Brunswickers. And this is one of them. So, you know, we're saying hit the pause button, consult, and, you know, sit down with New Brunswickers and see if New Brunswickers can be satisfied that the proper rules and regulations and oversight can be put in place. If so, great, let the industry move forward. If not, then we put a stop to it.
Yeah, the minister, I would say, on the Windsor Energy file, to me, he was shameful in the sense that the company admits they did wrong, so he goes and sends the file to the RCMP. Other than buying time, I'm not sure really what he did. You know, I was a minister of natural resource in the past, and you do have the power to revoke those permits. You know, if you didn't follow the policies or the regulations that are in place, then you're out of the game. And that would have showed a bigger sign, I think, that you're serious about cracking down on these types of activities than to just buying time by throwing it to the RCMP. That's just my feeling about it. I just think that was wrong.
I suppose you can't support a ban since your government license these people in the first place.
No, well, exactly. A ban hasn't been our position, because you're right, and I've never shied away from that either. We were in government when SWN got that contract,
but what possessed you to do that?
But well, no, but I'll tell you, go back.
Was it the money?
Go back in history. Go back 18 months when this issue, you know, when the contract was given to SWN. Nobody was talking about fracking. Like, it wasn't the top of mind issue that it is in North America today. You go back 18 months ago, even in the US, like, you know, the New York Times, I think, is the first media outlet that really started talking about it, and that was just, I think, last winter. Like, it kind of exploded, you know, when we discussed it at the cabinet table. It was hardly, you know, it wasn't an issue. I mean, you weren't hearing all the stories and all the issues that you're hearing today. And that's why I think, you know, had we won the election, I like to think we would have handled this file a lot differently than what the current government did, because the current government just isn't including New Brunswickers in the decision-making process at all. And despite, you know, campaigning on a promise to be open and transparent and to consult on issues of importance, they're not doing any of that on this particular file.
But you laid out the welcome mat for this industry.
We did. I don't shy away from that. But as I said, back then, it wasn't, you know, we weren't hearing all these stories. All this information wasn't out in public domain like it is today. So, I mean, we made the decision based on the information we had available to us 18 months ago.
What was the decision that you made?
Well, the decision that we made was to allow SWN to come in and do some exploration. I mean, it was basically an exploration contract that was given to them by the Department of Natural Resources. It was a public tender process. It had gone out to the public. Companies that were interested could submit a proposal, and SWN had the winning proposal that they were going to invest so many millions of dollars over, I think it was 3 years, to come and do some exploration work. So that's what was given to them. But like I said, since then, there's been all kinds of, you know, stories and issues that have surfaced.
You're telling me that you rely on you know, general media for research?
No, not at all.
If I could just add on that, attracting the company is only one part. You know, you always try to get some companies wanting to invest in the project and so forth. If you go, you can even read the press release. It's in black and white there. That was I think it was in March of 2010. The company accepted to come to New Brunswick and explore. But it was very clear that before you start exploration, that you have to get all the necessary permits with the Department of the Environment. And that's the process for the next several months that happened. But within those permits, you have to identify how are you going to do that exploration. Are you going to, you know, that's when I would have been shocked if, I mean, we weren't there at the time, but if you're putting propane in the ground, kilometers in the ground, and you're going to blow it up, if you don't think that's if you think that's a good thing, I mean, we're not on the same page here. But that stuff has to be identified when you apply for those permits, when those permits are issued or not issued, and that's the stuff that happened late last fall after the election. We brought them here, yes, we put the welcome mat, but we didn't sign the permits for them to do that kind of work. That work would have been identified, the type of chemicals you're using to put into the ground and so forth. So attracting the company is only one side, one step of the whole process. My experience with, again, I was Natural Resource Minister with the uranium plant. You know, we brought the company here, then, you know, the public really got concerned, and we put in very, very strict regulation. You couldn't go into you know, municipal boundaries or near certain. You couldn't go near watershed. You couldn't go. There was a whole list of things that were done to prevent, you know, any of this stuff to happen again. You couldn't go on a private property anymore without the consent of the property owner. So there's a lot of measures that can be done, but we did that with the public.
And so there is a lot of knowledge about how dangerous the potential dangers of uranium and a lot of deposits in New Brunswick, which is one of two main concerns about the fracking. The fact that could possibly migrate up into the water table, and we could be drinking that for a long time without even knowing it, until people start to die from cancer. I mean, you know, and the thing is, and the other one is the possibility, and I think they've proven it in England, that it can cause earthquakes. And the major fault line here in New Brunswick is right underneath that nuclear power plant. And that's insanity.
Actually, I think there was some in BC.
Yeah, but I mean here, if we ever had a major earthquake caused by this fracking, and I spent the afternoon in Penobscot yesterday, and we could smell the gas. You know, we were close to the well pass. You're walking along, and then you get this strong whiff of gas, and people now are starting to talk funny. And even the smokestack, the fire and flame was as tall as this TV on one of them, where they burn off the metals or whatever it is. They said they're cleaning the gas, but not all of it burns, so that's spewed out into the air. It's like,
well,
it just boggles my mind. It does.
But that's where, you know, like I said, government needs to make sure that there can be proper rules and regulations put in place to protect air quality, water quality, etc. And if not, then maybe the industry doesn't move forward. But they've got a lot of work that they need to do, and in the meantime, they should simply hit the pause button and stop it.
The government is doing nothing to help those people. People had to sell their industry. They're farmers. They're dairy and beef farmers. There are farms there that have had to sell their cattle. They lost their water, their drinking water supply, and the land sunk. And like there's quite a large area of land that was useful before that they could farm, and it's sunk. And it's not only sunk, it moved. So, you know, their concern is that even the well that's capped could be impacted by the earth shifting. It could possibly cause leakage, and nobody seems to be monitoring it down there. And people are scared.
And some of those well sites actually become submerged themselves in the spring.
Running right off into the Kennebecasis River.
But the government needs to answer why is their opinion so different today than it was 2 years ago. I mean, on the uranium pile, I mean, a lot of the same concerns and issues are popping up again.
Exactly.
And they were so adamant to put a stop to it, and actually within their platform they said we can put in a moratorium. So, you know, if it was bad then, why is it so great
Makes
today?
it good now.
I mean, those are questions you need to answer, and we'll have to take the time to question
Well,
here.
we've asked for Blaney to come in here tomorrow, and they're trying to set up a meeting that, you know, to see if she'll come, but I don't know what good it'll do.
I was wondering a couple of things. The first thing that comes into mind is I hear you say, you know, moratorium until we can get tighter regulations and whatnot in place. Am I hearing you correctly when you say that?
Yeah, and if those regulations are enough to appease the public concern,
Yeah,
and if
one
not,
thing that comes to mind then is we know that part of the process of extracting the gas from shale is drilling quite deeply into the ground, and then a horizontal drill, filling it up with such pressure using water and lubricants, and causing basically a man-made earthquake underneath to shatter that shale so that the gas is released. How can you control that? I mean, there is no technology to control what happens once that pressure is introduced and it's broken. The shale's broken out. How do you regulate something you cannot control? No, there is no technology that says we will create a fracture just here. It's boom, and whatever happens, happens. How do you regulate that? Explain to me how there is any way of regulating that. Are we going to send little men down the mines there to prevent things from fracturing that we don't want fractured? I mean, it just seems to me ludicrous that we can regulate that. We can regulate maybe to a degree what happens above ground, but below ground, how do we regulate what's going on down there?
that's a fair point. And I'm not a scientist or a geologist, so I don't know the answer to that. And maybe you can't. And if you can't, then you know. Then maybe the industry has to stop. But the point we're making here is that, you know, there is economic development potential here for the province, but not at all cost. So sit down with New Brunswickers, look at what exists in terms of rules and regulations across North America, around the world, and see if there's something that New Brunswickers can feel comfortable with. And if there's nothing that New Brunswickers can feel comfortable with, then you ban the industry. But let's not, you know, put the cart before the horse in case there is opportunity here that can be pursued for the province. Let's face it, we're a small province, we're in tough financial difficulties, and if we can, you know, find ways to generate income, we shouldn't just turn a blind eye to it, but let's be vigilant. Let's do our due diligence, and we need to, and that's where I say we learned the experience on the NB Power file. We need to include New Brunswickers in that decision. It can't just be made behind, you know, closed government doors.
What I'd like to say is, you know, first I'd like to be perfectly clear. I'm not affiliated with any political party. I don't carry any memberships anywhere, you know, as far as that goes. So I'm not speaking from any perspective that way. And the second thing that I want to be clear about is that for me there is no even if the risk was 0.0001%, it's too great for me. I'm an advocate, and I think I speak for most people here. We're looking for a ban, a complete and utter ban. But that being said, Dominic came here yesterday, as I'm sure you're aware, and his party came out yesterday talking about a conditional ban. Not just a moratorium, but a conditional ban. And he laid out conditions with which to measure industries and how they could operate in this province effectively. Is that something that you guys might be able to get on board with as a start? and perhaps use an opposition day to introduce legislation to work with the NDP, work with our groups in terms of laying out those conditions and making it really hard, not just regulations and and I'm always interested when you say you consult the public, because it seems to be like it's everybody but the people that have a say. Sometimes it feels that way. But I think I'd be very interested to see what the Liberals would do in terms of maybe working with the NDP and Green Party and other parties and other interest groups like ours in the non-political realm to look at introducing in an opposition day a conditional ban. For me, a moratorium it's not impressive. It doesn't do enough.
Well, up until yesterday, the NDP were also calling for a moratorium.
Like I said,
so their opinion simply changed yesterday on this file, and for whatever reason, and we're certainly we've got a couple of ideas up our sleeve as well for the upcoming session. I don't want to show my hand too early and tip off government, but we've got some suggestions that we want to bring forward as well to try to keep the pressure on this file and to have government at the very least, which is our position, put a moratorium in place. There's no rush here. The gas isn't going anywhere, and if anything, over time, its value is going to increase. So let's just sit on it and have a proper consultation with New Brunswickers. And David Allward campaigned on wanting to consult New Brunswickers. He's had so many consultations in the last year. There's a website dedicated where you see all the, and he's out. His government was out consulting on the accreditations required for mobile crane operators in the province of New Brunswick, but he's not consulting on an issue of significant importance like shale gas. So he's consulting when it's convenient. But when it's inconvenient, he's not, and that's the point that we're pushing him on, that there needs to be true and proper consultation.
Well, we're not against jobs. In fact, QB, we're working together with them, and they're supporting us to the extent where they're saying, yes, we want jobs, but not at any cost.
Mm-hmm.
Not at the cost of the health of people, and not at the cost of the health of the environment. And so, we support them too. People have to live as well. So, but to be mindful of the kinds of jobs that are being developed and industry, most of these companies that are here are not even from here. They're from Texas. And they're heavily, affiliated with characters like Halliburton.
Dick Cheney.
Dick Cheney. You know what I mean? Like, they don't care.
Yeah.
And people here will be left with the mess when they're done. They'll take all the money and hightail it out of here, and we'll be left with the mess. Who's going to pay for that?
You said an interesting statement, and I might be light years behind at this point. But did Swin, as an example, approach New Brunswick, or did New Brunswick approach the companies? Because that's really going to...
Well, my experience, when I remember how it's done, you go around the world, you go to trade shows, you go to... I've spoken to Houston, Texas on a couple of occasions where you promote the provinces, and then some companies that are there in the audience listen to you, and then they approach you. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think that's how the connection was made.
Because I know in my home, before I get cozy, I get to know the people. And maybe that was one of the things that got missed with this co-invitation or whatever, that the company should have been better known. What they were doing in other places should have been brought forward, should have been investigated. And you said, you don't always have all the answers beforehand, but I think some of the answers, some of the things happening were laid out in many different ways. We've been to many, many different presentations by these companies. We know what they're telling people. We know what they told you. And I know what we've done is we've gone out and questioned those things. Maybe it's time to start questioning them before they go any farther. Will you stand up over the next few weeks and say, this is not what our party wants at all.